This is Tony Toast. You are watching the Break It Down show.
Will you say Tony Toast again? It broke up a little bit for when I edit later on.
Yeah, this is Tony Toast. You're watching the Break It Down show.
All right, I dig it. Hey, the Pete's back at it again, by the way. Pete Koch sitting in studio. The Santa Anas are blowing like crazy here, fellas. I mean, it blew over a motorcycle. It knocked stuff down inside my tent. Is it windy where you are right now, Tony?
It's a little breezy, actually, this morning. We've got, like in our bedroom here, these little sliding glass doors were kind of rattling this morning from a little bit of, I wasn't sure if it was an earthquake or if it was wind, and it turned out to be wind. So yeah, but right now it's not too bad, but there's a few gusts.
Yeah. For anybody watching, this is Tony's second visit to the show. We had Hilliard Guess and you on before. Hilliard, of course, is a writer like you. And I thought it'd be fun to bring in Pete because he's an actor, and to have you guys have these conversations, especially right now. Like you said, the industry's shut down, not really doing a lot of stuff. I thought we could have a cool chat.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's fun. So thanks for having me back, and thanks, Pete, for joining us.
Yeah, Pete, and Tony, if I could jump in, and the process of people that write the material that you write so well in my businesses in the show business kind of thing, in the TV, the episodic, and looking at your history, your background, and a ton of formal education. Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it, right? Yeah. So you've got a master's and a PhD. That's right. In writing, and so, and you're an award-winning poet. So how does, it's a big question, but I mean, I have to say that caught my attention because I don't know how many people that's the route they take, and they end up in Hollywood with your success. So how do you make that jump, and at what point were the wheels spinning on writing screenplays versus poetry?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, it's been a little bit of a weird, windy path. I think the seeds of it was like, I did not grow up, like I'm a first generation college student, grew up in small towns, trailer parks. My parents both graduated from high school. They were like the day and night custodians at my elementary school. So we didn't have like tradition, it wasn't a cultured upbringing, though we loved Clint Eastwood movies and Burt Reynolds movies and country music and stuff like that. That was kind of my foundation. And I didn't really think about, I'm not one of those people that like found a 8mm camera in the attic and started making films at 8 years old, like Steven Spielberg or something. I didn't even think about myself as being creative until I graduated high school. I was working at a pickle factory. I was always into music, and I'd kind of decided I wanted to take a creative writing class at the local community college because I wanted to be the next Kurt Cobain, and I wanted to write music lyrics. And then I kind of accidentally discovered that actually I was into the words and the writing, and plus I can't really sing, which was and then around that same time, like I'd always watched Westerns and crime films with my dad, and we stumbled upon Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. And so I watched that all the time. And then around the same time when I was kind of getting into creative writing, Pulp Fiction came out, and that blew my mind. It was because I was already looking forward to it, because like Reservoir Dogs was kind of my favorite movie, and nobody knew about this guy. And then I went and saw it in the theater like 7 times, and I just went head over heels for it. And I actually started writing scripts. Then I was like, okay, I want to be the next Scorsese, Tarantino, Spike Lee. But I didn't know how to get there from where I was in small town America. And so I just decided, I just kind of kept in school. I did 2 years of community college. Then I went to this kind of Christian college in the Missouri Ozarks and did lots of theater. That's where I really got into poetry. And then my plan was to go to film school after finishing my undergrad. But then the economics kind of reared their head. Like, there's no way I could afford film school. And so I decided to apply to poetry programs. And then even then, like the economics were really, like I got into some really top programs like at Johns Hopkins and stuff, but I literally could not afford the drive from the Missouri Ozarks to Baltimore to go there. But I did get into the University of Arkansas, which was like a 2-hour drive. And so so I went to the University of Arkansas, did a 4-year MFA program there, played in bands, and then my first poetry book got published and got this literary award right when I was finishing up my MFA. And so I kind of thought, well, okay, I'm a poet now, because like I can get a job, I can get health insurance, I can. I've got a career path now other than being a drunken idiot in a band. And but then I met my girl. I started dating a girl who's now my wife, and she was moving to North Carolina to do a PhD. And so I moved with her. We'd been dating for like 2 weeks, and we were just madly in love. And so I just went with her. And I couldn't get a professor job at the local colleges because I was just I had one book out and just wasn't on their radar. And I couldn't get the jobs that I usually got because like up to then, like I'd always worked in restaurants, fast food, grocery stores. I cleaned condos, worked at a candle shop, a pickle factory, all this different kind of stuff. But now I was like overqualified for all these jobs. Like they wouldn't hire me because I had, an MFA and I had a book. And so they thought, well, this guy's not going to stick around. I finally got a job at a coffee shop and then a job counting traffic for the city of Chapel Hill, all these weird things. And I figured, okay, I'm stuck here in North Carolina, though I love North Carolina, but I couldn't really. Normally the path would be like I jumped from my MFA program and having a book, I would be a professor at some small college somewhere. But since I didn't want to yank my girlfriend out of her PhD program so I could go do a professor job. And I couldn't get a professor job there. I decided, okay, since I'm here and she's going to school, I'll just see if I can get into the PhD program at Duke, and that'd be better than working at a coffee shop. I can, it pays a little bit more. Like there's a different stipend, and I could just read books. And so then like that was like a 6-year program. So like, yeah, like a decade of graduate school. Like the screenwriting, the TV writing had always been nagging at the back of my head. I realized by the time I finished my PhD program and actually got hired as a professor that I kind of hated academia, that I didn't like that world, or I didn't fit into that world. It seemed mostly like politics more than books to me, and that wasn't appealing. And a buddy of mine from Arkansas, Nick Pizzolatto, who went on to do True Detective and some other cool stuff. This was before True Detective, when he was a staff writer for The Killing. We had always we go out for drinks and talk about how Sopranos and Deadwood was more interesting than novels at this point, or how that would be like doing something like that would be the ideal thing for a writer these days, because you could do high level work and actually reach people and actually be part of the culture, as opposed to being in some kind of precious bubble away from actual people. But he actually, so his novel got optioned. He actually broke in as a screenwriter, and for one, it's just like, oh shit, my buddy just did this. And also I realized I'd always just thought it wasn't for people like me, it was for Ivy League people to do the Hollywood writing thing, that I just wouldn't have a chance. But then I realized well, if I could, Nick got in, he didn't have any connections, he just wrote like a maniac. And so he offered to share, if I wrote some script, he offered to share them to his agents to see if they, and put in a good word for me. And so so that's what I did. Like right when I was getting ready to start my professor job, I wrote a pilot for an original show and gave it to Nick. He gave it to his agents. They seemed to really like it. They asked me if I had any more, and I said no, but I can write some more. So over the next 2 months, I wrote the next 3 episodes, and then then what happened was really weird, and I now realize it's kind of out of the ordinary. Basically, those agents, they passed my scripts around, mostly these 4 opening episodes of this TV show that never got made called Tangle Eyes, kind of a modern Clint Eastwood, Sergio Leone Western, but set in the world where I grew up in rural Washington State, which is a small town that was right next to the Muckleshoot Indian Reservation. So it was kind of a little bit of almost a throwback Western, but set in the modern world. And those scripts, I ended up getting a manager and an attorney, and they set up like a week and a half of meetings. So I flew in. We were living in Seattle at the time. I flew into LA for like a week and a half, and it kind of, my career happened over a week. Like I took a bunch of meetings. I got a job working for Longmire out of those meetings, and I got like 3 pilot deals. Like I sold a show to a studio in the room when I met with the people, and then got hired for like 2 more pilots. And so I flew back home after this week and a half, and it's like, oh shit, I guess I'm a TV writer now. And so I quit the professor job, and then just started faking it for a year, you know, to try to like the first episode I wrote for Longmire, like that's like the 3rd script I'd ever written in my life. Like I'd written like 2 scripts, I guess it was like the 5th, since I'd written 4 episodes of my own TV show. But like all of a sudden, like, oh God, I'm doing it for real now. And so I kind of just tried not to let on how terrified I was, and wrote 2 episodes in the first season. My wife, we were in Seattle because my wife was doing a postdoc. This is a long answer, I apologize. But and then we moved to Ann Arbor for her professor job, and I wrote 4 episodes in season 2 for Longmire because they liked the first 2 episodes that I did. And then I asked the showrunner what I had to do to be kind of full-time staff and not be a freelancer. And she said, well, you have to move to LA. And so our family moved to LA, and then I kind of went on the producer track, and I ended up being on the show for 5 seasons. Producing my own episodes and stuff like that. And that became my kind of education in the world of TV writing and screenwriting. And then I got my own show made. You know, I left after 5 seasons of Longmire to go do Damnation, and I started getting a foot in the features world. And so so it's been kind of after that first sudden jump into the water, it's been kind of, you know, circulating between jobs for hire and stuff just for me, and then sometimes I jump on a show and help make it and stuff like that, and you know, try to pay the bills. So that's the very long answer of how I went from, like, I think I was more of a imposter in the academia world than I am in Hollywood. I feel much more at home here, and I don't know if that's just because of temperament or because of my class background, or that I'm just happier creatively, but it felt like I kind of escaped academia and got into my briar patch, as opposed to kind of leaving home and heading out into something foreign.
That's an awesome answer.
Being here. Yeah.
So what else should we talk about in the 2 minutes we have remaining for that?
I want to lay this out for the audience. Who, first off, if they don't know your work, I mean, Longmire was great, and I remember I caught on to Longmire pretty early, and your name just kept growing in the show. It kept, you know, like all of a sudden I'm like, who the heck is this guy? He gets this world so well. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you were to tell that 18-year-old kid who maybe goes to community college because, you know, there's some courses there, if you were to tell him where you are now, would he even be able to, because you came so far, man.
Yeah. Well, I think he would believe it, because I've been blessed with a good amount of self-esteem creatively. So I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that's probably where I'm going to head up. No, I mean, I think part is sometimes, I do, like, I wake up, you know, once I made this religious conversion to realizing that, oh God, I'm a writer, artist. Like that's kind of my calling. I was kind of a lost, depressed kid and teenager up until that point, because I felt kind of just restless and unattached to life. I felt like I was just kind of, you know, just kind of slumped, and life was passing by and was for other people. Then all of a sudden, when I realized actually I have a stronger emotional connection to most art than to most people. But then that also brought me out of my shell and all that. So I kind of, once I realized around that age, 18 or so, 19, that art was kind of my focus, I kind of knew I'd always be doing something creative. The fact that I actually ended up doing something that would have some material benefits, like that I could actually like live in a pretty decent house in LA, like that still shocks me, especially since I'd spent so long as a poet where you don't make shit, like, nobody reads you, like, like my wife, like I wrote a book about Johnny Cash, and my wife would hide the royalties statements because they would be like $2, for like 6 months, and it's just too depressing. And like, I never lived in a house growing up. We only lived in trailers, and I always grew up so envious of people. Like, I just want to, like, that was like one of my big goals. It's like, I just want to live in a freestanding, non-mobile domicile. Like that's
right.
That's what I want. Everything beyond that, material wise, is gravy. It's like that element. I think the 18-year-old would be kind of surprised. The fact that I'm doing things creatively, or that I'm a working, knock on wood, working screenwriter, even though, careers are very short and it's a very brutal industry. But for right now, knock on wood, I'm still at it. I guess, yeah, I would be surprised, but I would almost would think like 18-year-old me would almost guess that I would be still some kind of starving artist making little independent films like the ones that were made in the 90s, or some kind of guerrilla stuff, and so maybe 18-year-old me would think I sold out by doing TV, but I'm pretty happy now.
The process of writing a screenplay versus, certainly very different than poetry, different than writing a novel. So, but did you have an advantage? All those, in a sense, the dues that you were paying with all that education, it's work. Look, I'm just a guy with a liberal arts degree, and it's still a lot of work, right? But nonetheless, when you're studying something that you enjoy, and so at the in-depth level that you did, were there, when you went to that screenplay format, were you able to draw on that formal education and your writing experience and turn that into some creativity and its success in a screenplay?
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool question, and I want to turn around and ask you something similar about your sports background and heading into doing what you do now, because like I think there's a lot. I was a shitty athlete. I wasn't a professional level athlete like you, but like I loved playing sports, and like that actual spirit, like I think just of being used to being yelled at by coaches and still being able to like function, like like some writers, I think, or just because their background, like to be able to like oh yeah, okay, I'm doing it wrong, yeah, I can adjust, I'm not gonna fall apart, but also like enjoying like being part of something bigger. But anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But what you're asking, I'd say yes and no, which is of course a cop out, but very specific. The yes is poetry, I think, was a great prep for screenwriting. One, because at least the poetry I wrote was so image-based. It's very much about trying to put specific images or feelings in a viewer's head, and it's the juxtaposition and the creation of images in order to express some emotion. And that could almost be the same description for a screenplay. Like ultimately you're writing, even though a lot of people, even writers, focus on the dialogue, screenwriting is ultimately writing in images, and cinema or TV at its best functions as a series of images with supplemented by dialogue, I think. Unless you're like Aaron Sorkin, where the dialogue, or Milch, where the dialogue is so good that it can carry things. to me, like the images and the actual faces and the landscapes and what you see on screen, that's the story, and the dialogue rides along with that. That's kind of and so like with that kind of, and that could be a little bit of my love of Westerns too, or the kind of stuff I like to write. It's a little bit less talky and a little bit maybe more laconic. But the poetry, the best poetry I think is kind of condensed, and you're used to kind of winnow down to the essence. That's very useful for screenwriting. And I think also years spent writing just for the joy of it. No, not really having an audience, not having really material benefits, but having to trust my inner voice, and also being able to accept failure as the kind of wages of creativity. All of that was great prep for a screenwriting career, because even as a working screenwriter, 80% of my working life is failure. Stuff doesn't get made, has to be rewritten. Stuff, I go up for jobs and I don't get them. Like that's a large part of my working day is just failing. And poetry, if nothing else, is great practice at failing. So all of that was great prep for screenwriting, and it's actually, I think, easier, to come to screenwriting from poetry than from fiction, because in fiction, so much, at least in a lot of fiction, it's so much internal monologue, and it's so much kind of voiceover, and all those things you can't really carry over to scripts, because scripts, again, are more externalized. It's less internal voice. And I have a lot of writer friends who are trained as fiction writers, and I think that's kind of the biggest jump for them, is to jump from an internal monologue and an internal voice to kind of externalized storytelling. And so even though I didn't have training in terms of narrative or drama, I did have training in terms of, like what I was saying, juxtaposing images and trying to capture people's attention. Now the PhD side, the critical side, where that part of it was terrible training for it. I had to go out and had to go kill that part of my brain. I still have to, when I'm like pitching something, or when I'm like outlining something, sometimes my my critic voice or my scholarly voice creeps in, and it's just death to drama. It can be so didactic and abstract, and so kind of keep you at arm's distance from the immediacy of what's should be going on. That's something I still have to overcome. It creeps in less when I'm actually writing scripts, because when I'm actually writing scripts, I'm watching a movie in my head and I'm writing down what I see. But when I'm trying to get a job, or I'm trying to write a summary of what the show is about that I want to make, or the movie I want to make, I have to constantly battle that internal academic. And plus also so much of academia, I think, is, especially in the, in the English departments that I was in, so much of it is about adopting the right political stance. That's and to me, that's also anti-art. That's not artistic. Artists should be able to kind of disassociate their own political beliefs from what's going on the page, and let their characters have their own inner life and their own inner dignity, even if we vote the same or do the same thing as our characters. And there's a urge to kind of editorialize or comment upon the morality of the politics. That happens, I think, a lot in modern academia, that I don't think, and that is kind of creeping into entertainment more and more, which I personally, I think is not necessarily what art's best at. So anyway, so yes and no in those kind of specific ways.
What about you, Pete?
Me? Pete.
Yeah. He threw the question back to you too.
Yeah. So I'm so curious about going from a high level professional athlete into doing this. Was that good preparation for you, or what? Or did you have to kind of adjust or evolve differently, or how much did you carry over? Like all of that, like it's such a cool, like it happens a fair deal, like, of especially it seems like former football guys, there's like a tradition of, even from like, Burt Reynolds, playing a college star, I guess, in Florida and stuff. And, there's
it was Florida State,
and so, but I've never really heard anyone speak about that transition.
I have thought about it, and there's a long history of NFL players that have had successes in Hollywood. Fred Dreyer, Alex Karras, and I see it this way. I see my training as an athlete at a very high level. I think it cuts two ways, and I do think there's a reason that football players, more so than basketball or baseball or tennis players, that tend to make it, and it's just my belief. But the two great big buckets, the way that being a professional football player works against you as an actor, is we spend our lives on that gridiron in the National Football League, and no matter how bad the situation is, no matter players are always in a lot of pain. If they're always at some level of an injury, some niggling thing. I mean, I can't even tell you the one thing that never gets talked about is when I was a defensive lineman, is all the guys I'm playing against were like 300 pounds plus, right? And I was 275. I wasn't small, but your feet get stepped on so often, and especially when you're playing on grass and guys are wearing hard cleats, it's incredibly painful. I mean, so your feet, your ankles, your hands are always getting beat up, and you're always just micromanaging. I used to look at it this way. I was taught this by a coach, and he would say, in between plays, do a systems check. What's a systems check? So just imagine if you could for 1 second, playing in Kansas City at the beginning of the season, 97 degrees, 97% humidity, and you're on the field for an extended drive. So I tell people, here's a good way to look at football. Football is a game of abject violence, 6 seconds at a time, every 30 seconds. So there's 30 seconds, the whistle blows, get up off the ground, get back in the huddle, call the play, get ready, and then the quarterback says, hike again, bam, it's chaos, it's violence. The average football play is about 6 seconds, and then you get 30 seconds to recover from that. It's incredibly demanding. So a systems check would be, think about where your head is, think about your body, think about your breathing. You want to control your organism to optimize your recovery, because you're not going to be like when the first play of the drive where you've been sitting on a bench with a Gatorade for the last 4 minutes, you're fresh and ready to go. But 7 plays into that drive, you're absolutely exhausted. Now, the guys on the other side of the ball are too. But that's just the way it goes. But your heart's coming out of your chest, and you got those 30 seconds to recover, get yourself together. If someone just stepped on my damn foot again, or I just broke my pinky, what am I going to do about it? All I'm going to do is focus, but do that systems checks, collect myself, and then and go. I had a little checklist. I would go through the things that were on my mind and the way that I was going to position my own self for success on the next play. It's always the next play. It's always the next play. By the way, if that last play you did something great, you sacked the quarterback, made a great tackle, good. Or if you got blocked, or if you fell and missed the tackle, no matter what happened on that last play, that is history. That's got to go way back, all the way back. So you learn how your memory's got to work very selectively. The only thing that matters is the next play. So that training right there, when it comes to taking direction, when it comes to being prepared and understanding what professional preparation is, I think that serves and has served me and serves athletes very well when it comes to acting.
We've heard this theme several times. I was going to say, one of Pete's friends was on the show, and he was a professional bicycle rider, like BMX rider, and his attention to detail, the requirement for preparation, because you can't go in unprepared. You have to do a trick 1,000 times. And when you put that discipline, on the stage in front of lights, they're just incapable of being unprepared.
No, that is so cool hearing about some of it cut out. So I didn't get every detail, unfortunately, but the mental discipline element of it, the systems check, and of the 6 seconds of violence, and then it's almost like recovery, and then prep for the next round of that. I mean, you may have made this good connection and I missed it, but I mean, some of that sounds like filming, less physical, but just in terms of so much of filming is hurry up and wait, they've got to, do the lighting, prepare stuff, and then everything builds up, and then boom, you're, all of a sudden you're supposed to be in a different emotional reality all of a sudden, and then it's over. And then you have, you kind of probably, have to prep yourself for another one, and also pace yourself. Like one thing, like I used to always be kind of assholey dismissive of actors and actresses, because I just thought they were, oh, how hard can it be to look pretty and memorize, say things that other people wrote for you. But then the first time I was on set, I was like, oh, holy crap, this is work that I would not be capable of, because I mean, especially if you're the lead of a TV show like Robert Taylor, Walt Long, he's not only working 12, 13-hour days, where he has to be on, if he's off, it throws the whole thing off, and he has to be emotionally present over and over again from multiple different angles. And he's faced with a variety, sometimes he's acting with people like Katie Sackhoff and Lou Diamond Phillips, who are there every episode and are total pros. Sometimes he's also acting opposite someone who got cast, and who's only done local theater, but, is nearby and we can afford, and they kind of look the part, but but he's still got to his scene partner all of a sudden, varies widely in their quality. And then it's not just that, but then he's got to go home and prep for the next day, so he knows all of his lines for the next day. And just the physical and the mental and emotional exhaustion and the resilience necessary to do that. All of my kind of disdainful thoughts about actors and actresses was instantly evaporated. All of a sudden I was kind of humbled by their capacity for doing that work, and then and I was like, oh, this is a kind of athletics, but but maybe foregrounding the emotional and the psychological, which I'm sure also plays a much bigger part at the highest level than I'm aware of as a crappy high school athlete. But all that is fascinating, and it's thinking about what other kind of athletes, football actors, do really, football players, and then pro wrestlers seem to be able to make the transition pretty well. And I don't know if that's just the physicality or that kind of ruggedness, or if there's a similar kind of discipline involved in terms of kind of that systems check, and then a sudden spurt of intensity, and then reset. Anyways, it's very cool to hear about all that.
I have a question.
I've got one other question, at least one more. Okay. Go ahead, Pete.
No, go ahead.
Okay, me? Yeah. So, okay. So just back to a procedural question, because I'm thinking of a good buddy of mine that is a writer. He started out as an actor, mm-hmm. and then he got into production, and he actually was an associate producer on a very popular reality show, but a lot of money the stakes are high. The show's been running for years, and he learned a lot. And then he's a very talented writer, so he got into that game too. So he's got these, but he's just right there on the edge, but looking to go to the next level. And he talks about his ability. He's got formal training and successes in production as well as writing, and you're doing both. And I think he talks about that as sort of it's a vaulted position that you would have to work yourself to, and you've done it right through your writing and given the opportunity to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to put your arms around the production and have a greater impact. Could you speak to that a little bit? And I guess now that you're moving, just going up in your career, wearing multiple hats, and how does that shape your life, and what kind of a challenge is that?
Oh, I think the wind is kind of causing our wireless to not work great. So we'll let him pop back in. But we'll check in with Pete. Hey, Pete, how are you?
Hey, Tony's awesome, man. The stuff his background is absolutely staggering. Yeah, and his successes are great.
Tony's back. All right.
Hey, I think I got back on. It's nice to see you guys' faces. I didn't get to see your faces for a while. So Pete, I think it cut out a little bit, but I think you were kind of asking about the kind of duality of both writing and producing and doing that. Yeah. I mean, that's, so there's kind of a truism that you write a show 3 times. Like, you write it, you write it on the page, and then you write it again when you're actually on set producing it, and then you write it again in the editing room. And I think it took me a couple of years to understand my role as a producer. I think I wasn't on set my first season on Longmire, but then season 2, our showrunner Greer Shepard, who was amazing, she, on her own dime, she flew me out to New Mexico so I could be on set, and she kind of basically took me under her wing. She's like, okay, I think you're gonna have your own show someday. You need to learn how to be a producer, not just a writer. And so she kind of flew me out. But this is before I was full time, and the studio would pay, so I could get hands-on experience producing. And at first, and Robert Taylor from Longmire, he would poke fun at me gently because he could see that I was doing this, and he knew where I needed to go. First I thought my role to be on set was to be the defender and protector of the script. Like I've got the precious holy word in my hand in the script, and I'm to be on set, and all of these barbarians are trying to lessen the purity of this script, and I'm here to defend it. I mean, I wasn't like a jerk about it, but there was this kind of anxiety, high-strung kind of thing, and I would always be intervening if things didn't go exactly as they were. And then I gradually realized that no, actually, I'm here. I'm more of a midwife. Like the writer part of me is like, I had my turn on the page. Now, what I'm here to do is to kind of help midwife the best version of this story that can appear on screen. And sometimes that means if it goes off script and it's making the scene worse, intervene. But more often it means kind of standing back, giving it a chance to breathe, being there to support the emotional athletes, who are the cast, and to be a resource for them and not an obstruction to them, and to also to like, and as I eventually had my own show or had a little bit more authority on the terror infamy, it also would mean like in rehearsal, I would listen very carefully, or during early takes, and sometimes like my writing was what's wrong with the scene, and I wouldn't realize it until it was actually on set, or sometimes at the table read. And so part of it was me being attentive to what is actually going on in front of me and not be so focused on the page, because the person watching at home, they don't know what the script is. They're not going to be, after an episode's done, you don't turn to your spouse and say, boy, that really kept fidelity to the script. No, you're like, that either moved you or interested you or you didn't. And so then I kind of changed my, my energies towards doing what I could to facilitate the best possible material to end up to be in the hands for the editor. And then once I'm in the editing room, it's to be very honest and to see if a scene's not working, to be attentive and alive, and to listen and to watch what's actually going on and make little adjustments or stay out of the way, and to be constantly allowing the show to have its own life and to be a part of that, as opposed to an obstruction to that. And that's all a little hippie, loosey-goosey, but it's kind of a vibe or a feel, and it's orientation. Also, a lot of my job is to prep the directors and the department heads before the episodes that I write. So that means, walking through scene by scene. This is what we're aiming at the scene. This cast member sometimes has trouble with this type of scene or has this tendency, look out for that. Really, getting everybody, all the different crew members, whether it's production design, stunts, art department, cinematography, the camera department, make sure everybody's kind of making the same show and everybody knows what the vision is, and also allowing input. It's a little bit, so you kind of always go from being the player on the page to being the coach in a way, or and that's, and then finally when you're in the editing room, you're kind of the artist again. And it's less about kind of facilitating others than being discriminating, being very honest, and sometimes trying to recognize where there's problems and try to come up with solutions and things like that. And then, so that's that element of it, seeing, it's incredibly deeply satisfying, especially if it turns out well, to go from being in the writer's room brainstorming an episode, then kind of writing the cards out kind of beat by beat. These are what the scenes are, adjusting that, and then writing an outline, getting feedback, adjusting that, then writing the first draft, the second, the third draft, and then you have your script, and then you get actually into prep and you realize, oh shit, this version of the script is over budget, and it's going to be too long, and we can't get this car, and we don't have the time to do this, so now we got to adjust that, or we get, and so then the script, so then you go from, adjusting the script to the actual material conditions of filming it so you can actually film it, and then prepping the director and the team, being available to the cast if they have questions or if they have hangups with the with scenes. So I tend to have my request of the cast is that if they have problems, just let me know ahead of time and we'll talk about it, and maybe we can find something better, but don't do it on set. If there's real issues or something hanging up, just I'm open all the time, and often I'll revise with feedback, because especially regular cast members know their characters better than anybody else and know their inner life, and I want to give them the material that they need to actually, I would rather have them perform at 100% of a version of a scene that's slightly off of my intention than to have them stick to the intention and be only at 80% effectiveness. I want to find that happy medium where we're both happy. So it's a lot of that. So to walk through that stage and to actually be on set and to give feedback to the directors, to say I don't know if we got the scene yet, or I think we've got it, or I think we're going to need a shot at the over here so that we can have this in the edit. Being in production after I was involved, worked very, very closely and had the final edit on every episode of Damnation post-production, and going through that process of being in the editor's room and realizing, oh shit, we don't have this, we don't have that. You do that enough, you start to anticipate what you're going to need on scenes and what you're going to, I'll be sitting in Video Village and imagining myself in the editing room 2 weeks from now, and like, do I have what I need to have a couple of options, or if, you know, so it's a lot of stuff. Then to see it through the editing stage, and then to like, you know, work with a composer on scoring it, and to like mix it, all that stuff, like, and then to have it finally go out and be out in the world, like that's so deeply satisfying, because there was nothing, and now there's this, for better or worse, this thing, and you were kind of there raising it from nothing to something, and then now it's out in the world. It's a very addictive, enjoyable process, especially if you're on a show you believe in, working with people that you like, which has been pretty much my career so far.
There's a lot of detail in what you're talking about. I mean, it's not just the muse and you write and that's it, but figuring out how to get a good guy that can get any car that you need so you can get the shot with the right car. I mean, that's not stuff we think about. What are some of the things that you have picked up along the way? You're like, I never even knew this job existed, and I could not live without it.
Well, I mean, I never realized how essential a great prop master is. You know, just because like they're amazing. Like, you know, like it's their job, but like they get a script, and especially, you know, my last 2 shows have been period shows. One set in the 1930s, one set in the 1940s. Now I'm sitting at home like, oh, wouldn't it be great to, you know, so he picks up a sardine can and throws it at a candle, and then somebody pulls out a revolver and shoots it. Like, those are just words, and takes me 2 seconds. He's got to, like, the prop master's actually got to go out, find those things in the real world on a budget, like in like a couple days. Not only that, but give me some options so me and the director can be creatively happy with what they've got. Like, you know, like on Damnation, I had this idea for a steam-powered sex machine. like so like a strap-in steam-powered and edited this to a dildo, basically, and it played a part. And so our problem, like, he had to find someone to build that. They had to share blueprints with me. We had to, like, you know, fine-tune the shaft. Is it going to be wood? Is it going to be metal? We ended up with like lacquered wood. You know, is there straps or no straps? What color is it? If we build it, does it actually, it has steam power, so that when you turn it on, you can actually see the steam, but it's also got to work reliably, because, you know, we've only got so much time. We shoot an episode in 7 days. We can't be standing around waiting for the sex machine. So it's got to run over and over again. Like, that's a half of, that's like one scene on one day. And at the meanwhile, you know, he's finding all this other stuff. So that, you know, you can live or die with a, you know, with your set dressing, because like so much, we fetishize, you know, like cinematography is amazing, but like a good cinematographer can only do so much. It can only work. It's not just lighting. It's the overall mise en scene between, you know, what's there in production, what's on the walls, what's dressed there. So you have production design and art design, designing the set or finding the location. So like a locations manager is essential, because like you write, you know, like the scene takes place in a barn. Okay, like we're filming in Alberta, Canada. We need a barn that someone will actually rent out to us for a day, that's within a radius, so that it does, so we can actually get to it. And we have to pair that up with probably 1 or 2 other locations, so that we can make an actual day of it. And so like that's the location manager, that's the first AD, and that's the line producer of coordinating all of that, so that, you know, we can actually film there. We first, like, the logistics of the prep of doing all that. And then, you know, sometimes a day or 2 ahead of time, the owner will change their mind or say, oh, I forgot that we've got, you know, this going on. Is that going to be a problem? Yeah, it's going to be a problem to have a circus going on next to where we're filming. We've got to find someplace else. But then, you know, so you get that location, you get that barn, but then you get inside and the color's all wrong. So, you know, you got to get the build, you know, production design got to send in painters, and then we got to actually dress it so it looks right, and we've got to actually put get rid of all the modern equipment, find period appropriate equipment, and then set it up so that it looks like it's been used every day for years in 1931. And and then we got to somehow figure out how to get lights in there so it looks good. And then assistant directors got to figure out where we're going to put the circus, where all the trucks are, and where we're going to have lunch. And so like there's this, you see like this tiny thing on screen, and so if like in a scene, if you actually like turn the camera, you would see just hundreds of people running around like doing all this prep work, all this preparation, just so that you can then try to create a space that feels natural and looks lived in, and then move on to the next one. The degree of work that it takes to do that, I don't think you can anticipate unless you've been on set, but also unless you've kind of even been on set, if you've been involved in prep, and just the amount of conversations, compromises, imaginative thinking, and kind of persuasive negotiating that goes on, because you've also got to keep, you want to try to keep your crew, you want to be somewhat humane to your crew, even though it's such a hard job. You want to keep your cast engaged and invested. You also want to keep the studio happy in terms of both the product, but also in terms of your budget and your schedule. You want the network to be happy with what they're seeing in the edits and in dailies. You have producers involved who want to put in their 2 cents. And so like, when you're show running or producing, like, so there's that it's so much of your job is to advocate and to do the work behind the scenes so it doesn't impinge on the actual creative moment. So there's the muse part, but then there's also just the brute logistics and brute internal politics of it, which you're trying to kind of almost create a safety net for the creative people. And so like, again, as like a writer producer, to kind of recognize that like in the production stage, in the prep stage, your kind of spell of creativity is kind of gone to the background a little bit. Now your job is to create space for other people, and then and then also to give yourself material so you can be creative again and edit. Like that's some of my favorite stuff. It both gets me excited and gives me a little bit of a sick stomach talking about it, because it can be so stressful. But it's like, I can only call this as like addictive, and it is kind of like playing sports in a way, because it is, you're trying to do your part to have this bigger thing work, and what that is changes minute to minute, hour to hour. Sometimes you gotta step in, and sometimes you have to be the bad guy. Like accepting that, like I'm a pretty chill person. I don't like confrontation generally. I don't seek it out. But I had to kind of, like when I was show running Damnation, each day I'd say, okay, who are you gonna let down today? Because I knew every day I'm gonna disappoint somebody in my decision. Like I can't keep everybody happy or tell them what they want to hear. And so it's just that's a given. Every day I'm gonna tell somebody my decision or make a request, and I'm gonna walk away and they're gonna bitch about it. And I just have to, and bitch about me. And I've just got to accept that. Like that's just part of the job. Like I wanted this gig. I get to have some creative input on it, but part of it is sometimes I tell people things they don't want to hear. And it's my job to do that, like as opposed to passively aggressively or just hoping things turn out, to actually say like, I think you're playing this wrong, or I think we're going to have to redo the scene. I looked at dailies, and I think we messed up that scene, and we're going to have to find time in the schedule and in the budget, and we're going to have to get that cast back, because I don't think we can responsibly allow what you filmed to end up in the final cut. And that's not a conversation that a director or a line producer or a cast member wants to hear. But you can either avoid that and have a lesser product, or you can do it in a polite, respectful way and try to have the end product come out okay. And that's something that I didn't know I was signing up for when I first started writing scripts. I kind of thought I write it, and I sit back at Video Village and I watch it, and everything just happens. But it doesn't work that way.
I do my own version of that on the podcast. It's my job as the host. It's my job as the producer to get these things right. And if something's not right, up to and including, hey, we're going to cancel today. Like today with the wind, it's probably affecting our wireless, right? Yeah. At some point I've got to say this is good enough or this is not good enough. And then if the sound, like at first the microphone didn't sound good, I know that it's my job, regardless of feelings, to say we got to fix this mic. And it is not easy. I'm talking about small things. You're talking about people's livelihoods at times and their ability.
Yeah, no, I've had to fire people, recast people, and it still, like, I think about it and I think about, God, that sucked, but like I kind of had to do it. It wasn't the right fit. And that's like part of my job, I realized, and this is something I had to kind of teach myself, as part of my job is to create the conditions in which I can do my best writing. And so it's not just to like write and hope for the best and then be bitter when it doesn't work out. But part of my job is to think about how I what stories I decide to tell, how I want to go about, who I want to try to enlist to be my partners, how I present it, but also like, when I pitch a show, like one thing I realized, when I pitch a show, and especially if it sells, like right now, we pitched a show set in the world of coal mining, West Virginia. We're negotiating with two different platforms for it to end up with. So we don't know which one it's going to be. And so it's just, it will, once we hopefully close the deal, then I write the pilot script with their input, and then if they like that, then maybe we either make the pilot or we make the first season of the show. Most pilots don't go forward beyond the writing stage, but maybe it will. But part of my job, once we close the deal and as I start developing the idea, is to find out the show that they think they're buying, check it with the show that I think I'm making early on, and if there's a gap, close that gap. And then, but if there's some things that they're not quite on board with yet, to try to teach them step by step and to enlist people so they feel ownership in it, so that by the time they get the script, they kind of know what they're getting. And there's no bad surprises, there's only good surprises, and they feel invested and they feel excited and they feel respected and listened to. That's part of my job. It's not just writing a good script, but to kind of create the conditions by which hopefully my script will be well received, and people who make the decisions will be excited and have some ownership in the show and will feel listened to and respected. And that means I have to be able to like make some adjustments, find what they're excited about in the show, and kind of, amplify the elements that excite them and maybe revise some of the elements that don't, without losing the heart of the show that made me want to write it in the first place. So all of that's something that I didn't realize early on. It's not just like it's not a blank slate. You can actually try to cultivate your audience and to let other people in and feel invested and feel excited about what you're writing, and that life's a lot better that way, creatively.
Two sports analogies came to my mind in the last few minutes listening to you, Tony. And one is, at least I heard this in football, is in all of the 20 years I played contact football, I had a lot of coaches, and I was very fortunate to have some good coaches, and I had a lot of crummy coaches. And, but all as an athlete
wireless is not working. All right.
Oh no.
Well, you and I can chat for a second. We'll see what happens. This is so crazy, man.
It's just going to get good.
Yeah. Well, remember where he was at when he comes back. Let me see if I can. Man.
So, some good coaches and some crummy coaches.
Yeah.
And then it kind of froze up on my end.
I'm going to kick him out of the studio, and then that way he'll come back in. And then.
Okay.
And thanks for doing this, by the way. It's super fascinating. It might seem like boring stuff to you, but when you close your eyes and you're like doing it, like it's so interesting what you come out with. It's, you know, the end product is all we see. We don't see all the work and all the machinations. You're building an audience for your work, but you're also building an audience for what you sell to the marketplace too, you know, and it's such a, I never considered that you need to be viable wherever you go.
Yeah. You have to kind of recognize, you know, is there, because I love, you know, like Damnation, like I didn't intend to write a show set in the Great Depression. I just wanted to write a Western. And I had a story about two brothers, but I recognized like I'm probably not going to get a Western made. You know, like there's just a big industry bias against it. And so like I was looking for other time periods in which I could tell a Western like story and then set it there, and where it would have some kind of, where it'd feel a little bit closer to our present day, you know? And so like that's part of, you know, like trying to find, you know, to recognize what has no hope or what might have some hope.
We lost
you at, oh, cool. Thank you. We lost you at good coaches and scummy coaches, and then it kind of froze.
We can't hear you.
The volume's too low on the mic.
We'll get there. Great. Luckily, this all comes out post. No problem. The live version, you know, but whatever. Nope, it's still quiet. Do you want to come out and come back in? Try one more time. Nope. I'm gonna. Sometimes if I kick you out and have you come back in, it works. So let's just try a reset on that. I'll send you out. Just come right back. Okay. Live production, Tony. This is what we have to do these days.
Yeah. So is this going to be video and audio, or are you just going to do the audio version?
The video part is going out already. It just is what it is. It's live, you know. So, but the audio version, I always clean that up so that it has a chance to, you know, be the best of what we've talked about.
Gotcha.
Okay. Let's hopefully Pete's good this time. Give it a try, Pete.
So coaches can't. That's any better?
It's quite. Maybe hold the mic closer to your mouth like that. Maybe.
Okay. I could try without the headphones.
Yeah, give it a shot. I can't hear you at all now. You might have to change the mic in the settings. You know, just
no worries. It's
good.
Usually me. That's usually my end. That's
If you're talking, we can't hear you. Man, this is frustrating. Okay, he's going to try that. I was gonna ask you while we're waiting for Pete to figure out the tech side of things. Is Johnny Cash your spirit animal? Because you're clearly inspired by him. He's a poet, musician, actor.
Yeah,
he loves the downtrodden, and I think you do too. Like, you know, the Ballad of Ira Hayes and all that stuff. Oh, Pete's back.
Any better this time?
Let's just go with this. I'll fix this part in post. Just talk a little louder, and then we'll listen really quiet.
Okay. Okay. So I know that a coach cannot make a play for me. He's never going to throw the ball or make a tackle or sack the quarterback. He cannot do any of that. All I can hope for, and his job is, by the way, and his responsibility is to position me for success. To position me for success. And the coaches looking back on as I got older and removed from the game, where I had a chance to process as an older
good
person,
there for a second. Can you?
Is the most disappointing looking back on my career was the coaches that I had that failed to adequately position me for success. After all, that was their job. That was their responsibility. Yeah. And at this point in my life, whenever I'm not a coach, not a football coach, but when I'm even in a situation where I'm simply working with somebody else or coaching them up, I've had different businesses and I used to own my own gym. I would often think, what is my job in this position right here with this younger person that is counting on me they're counting on me, let's face it, to position them for success. And so I think about that a lot, and it came to my mind when you were talking about all the things that you do as on the production side, and to make everybody better.
I think that's a perfect metaphor. I love positioning. Yeah, especially. I mean, like that is because like as the person who is kind of responsible for the script, brought it in. The script better than everybody else. And so you need to position people for success in executing and to get people excited about the script, excited about their job, give them the accurate information, but also, allow them, encourage the orientation so they can be creative, they can have ownership without making a totally different show. But then, and then also in terms of, in the writing stage or the development stage I'm in now, as much as I can position myself, be that role for myself as a writer, like to almost cut myself in half. Like there's the part of me that's like, okay, I know my process, I know what I want to do, I know hopefully my strengths and weaknesses as a writer, and I know maybe some of the obstacles to like this show getting made or the best show, this version of the show getting made. And so, how do I enlist the other people and create conditions so that I can also do my best. But then when it's time to kind of take that hat off and put in like the coach hat and recognize, okay, how do I but that's also like it took me, it seems almost so basic to say, but it took me years to realize this. It took a lot of trial and error and a lot of like a lot of me being like behind Video Village, frustrated. Why is this not how I envisioned it? And then I realized, well, did I communicate that vision? Did I enlist? Did I check in with department heads in the development and getting ready and see how things are coming along? Was I continually teaching what the show is about? Was I sharing images of that I had kind of in my mind so that they could kind of actually see, like, oh, no, you kind of want this to look like there will be blood, this is kind of what you have in mind. We can work around that, as opposed to like we were imagining, what the same kind of building looked like, I don't know, Silverado or something. Like it's a different vibe, so you have to actually and to help encourage and get people, like you say, in the position so they can actually do what you want them to do and maybe even exceed your expectations. That's tricky, especially if you're an introvert weirdo like me, like it doesn't come, I almost have to create a persona. Like I often in the first I don't change voices or give myself like a Southern accent or something, but start talking like Foghorn Leghorn. But sometimes like, in the first couple weeks, like I'll warn people, like I can be very critical, and I'll give notes, and I'll and in a way like I'm almost doing more to give myself permission to raise up a flag sometimes. If I and also the same way, like I try to be friendly, but I try not to be too friendly with cast and crew. Like I try, because I don't want it to feel like a personal betrayal when I tell them, like, I don't think the scene is working how you're doing it. I think we're gonna have to make this adjustment. Like if there's, same thing with the writers, like in the writers' room for Damnation, like we'd break for lunch and the writers would all hang out at the writers' table, and I'd go to my office. I needed to catch up on work anyways, but also I wanted to give them some space away from me, but also to create a little bit of separation. So that way when I, have to come in and rewrite a scene or give them feedback or cut down a story idea, it doesn't feel like, oh, the buddy who was laughing with me 2 seconds ago at the dinner table is now all of a sudden, backstabbing me. Like I want to keep a little bit of distance without being inaccessible or without being, so like it's a tricky, and each show has its own personality and its own different vibe that you have to kind of I think adjust on, which I think is probably a little bit, each team, just as a fan, like it seems like each team, I follow basketball more than any other sport, but each team has its own vibe. Like the Lakers this year had a different vibe than last year, just even in terms of the culture on the bench, and in terms of how they, just the kind of ethos, and like, or like watching like LeBron or Jimmy Butler, like, first 3 quarters, turning down shots to facilitate their teammates so that they all feel invested and involved, but also so they build some confidence so that when a big shot comes, that it's not all of a sudden coming out of nowhere. Like, all those, I think, kind of metaphors carry over pretty well to my job, just more boring. No, nobody's gonna tune in to watch the writers' room break down an episode and try to figure out how to turn 3 company moves on day 3 of filming to 2 company moves. Like it's not gonna bring in the ratings. But yeah, cool.
Hey Pete, you said you had another example you wanted to bring up back when we first started this. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I can't hear you. Pete, we can't hear you. There you go. Oh, there you go. We can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's the jack. I would say I gleaned this from listening to actually a Major League Baseball manager on, I was listening to Sports Talk Radio, and it just caught my attention. And again, I like to draw the very great distinction between football and baseball, right? I love both. I played both growing up, and I'm a fan of watching both, but they're very different. And football is incredibly complex and not very, in baseball, I like to think of it as something much more organic. And it's at a much slower pace, and there's no clock. There's innings. Who knows how long the game will take, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that's a little bit more. That's a little bit also. I think that carries over into the culture in the locker room. And this baseball manager said the most important thing he can do. Yeah, he's got to hand in a lineup, a roster card, a lineup card, and he's gonna make decisions about if they want to bunt, that kind of thing. But the most important, above all, to get them through and be successful as an organization, as a team for a long, long season, is managing expectations and outcomes.
Yeah.
To the individual, to the team, to the units, to the pitching group, and saying, here's our expectation of you as this team, as a hitter, as a fielder, etc. And it's chronic, it's constant. But do you have a guy that's in a slump and he needs to be picked up, or do you have a guy that's just hitting the cover off the ball and just leave him alone? You got some pitchers that need a pat on the back, and others stay clear of them. Yeah, they're in their own head. Yeah, you can't do any. Yeah,
or some probably need to be barked at. Like they respond to they need it's like gauging that. Yeah, that's also managing the
expectations and outcomes.
Expectations. Yeah. And then having the integrity and I think the sand to not tell people the expectations you think they want to hear, but to actually, if it's not the expectation they want to hear, like I think in the long run, like, you will really ruin things if you tell them what you think they want to hear and not actually what your expectation is, because the outcome's not going to match, and you're that trust is going to erode. And I've seen that happen of kind of, the kind of classic kind of Hollywood, like, oh yeah, you'll be a star. This this season's going to be focused on your character, and then they come around and that season isn't. You didn't really mean it. You were just saying it to get out of that conversation, as opposed to having the harder conversations. Like, no, like actually the season's going to be focused on our lead characters, but we think you can be a star in this role, and this is kind of what we have in mind to really shine, and actually, it's going to be really key, the dynamic between the two of you, and stuff like that, and kind of try to get them, like you're saying, like some fidelity to what the actual expectations are. And then I don't know, like one thing that, it's also just good to find out, to like on Damnation, like for all the lead cast, when we got to a certain point of breaking season 1 before we started filming, we invited each cast member to come in for a couple hours, and we kind of broke out to them, like, this is all subject to change, but this is kind of where we see your character's arc for the season. This is where it's going to go, so you kind of know what are we missing, about like what you're hoping, like you, and almost what excites you, what doesn't excite you, what concerns you. And then, and oftentimes the cast is like, oh, no, that sounds great. I can do that. If there's small things I'll talk about. A couple of them just like, oh, I kind of thought my character would do this, or there might be this kind of thing, or I'd love it if my character did this. And then us trying to actually like incorporate that into the storytelling, if it worked for us as well, like that went a long way to having a fairly happy cast. I think we only had one season, so it's easy to have a happy cast, but seasons 3, 4, and 5 are tougher. But yeah, that idea of managing outcomes, like that's also something that I didn't realize, like when after we filmed the pilot of Damnation, there was it took 6 months to get the green light to actually get the show made. And one thing that like our main executive at the studio did is like we would finish a cut of the pilot we feel good about, and we would strategically invite 3 executives from the studio, from the network, to come in just with me, and to view the pilot where it stood, and then to give feedback. And then, what's working, what's not working, we try to make little adjustments. And so, and then little by little, we, our kind of posse of advocates grew within the institution. And that was like a good lesson. That's not something I would have thought of, but that kind of triggered this idea of like, in an honest way, like get the people who are making the decisions like on your side as much as you can. And that's something that I think people coming in or trying to come in, you don't have to worry about at the beginning, but it's something you have to, that skill set to communicate clearly is so huge. It's so, I don't know.
Hey, well, we've been going at this for quite a while. Pete, do you have any other questions at all?
I don't, but I've enjoyed this conversation a great deal. I appreciate it, Tony.
Me too. No, it's great talking with both of you. And I feel like we weathered the storm. We came out the other side. Better men, and hopefully, better citizens, more. Yeah. No, this is great. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks for chatting. It's a nice change of pace from normal sitting around and trying to come up with fake realities. It's nice to actually talk.
Yeah, and everybody, if you haven't figured it out yet, Tony does really, really, really good work. Damnation is available. You can get all these things. A lot of times they're on Netflix. Netflix loves Longmire. It's always on there, and thank goodness, because it's so good and beautiful. And then season 2 of The Terror, which is that available? I guess on Amazon is where the link is for, but that's been on AMC, I believe, in the past. Yeah,
it was on AMC. I think you can probably get to it via Hulu, via Amazon, and or I think there's a Blu-ray out, Blu-ray and DVDs out for it. But yeah, that's a 10 episodes, kind of a ghost story set in and around the world of Japanese American internment during World War II. So it's kind of fusing the real history of the Japanese American community during that time, fusing it with a kind of a traditional Kaidan Japanese mythic ghost story.
Yeah.
And so hopefully kind of the genre and the history kind of inform each other, and it becomes a way of kind of telling that story through a genre lens. And so that was cool to like jump into. Yeah, Damnation and Longmire both on Netflix, and hopefully I'll have more coming sooner or later, presuming that there's still going to be an industry. I think there's some places still that have started, some productions that have started back up. I've got buddies that are filming now, so eventually, hopefully, we'll get some stuff. I'd love to get this coal mining show set in West Virginia going. I think that could be a different world, kind of the Johnny Cash that we were talking about. In a short thing, like if you're asking if Johnny Cash was my spirit animal, like Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard are like my two main artistic heroes, because they're both, and Clint, I would put Clint Eastwood in there too, partly because like I just attached to them as a kid. They were kind of, I had a fraught relationship with my adoptive father, and so like in a way I kind of adopted them as father figures. But there's something soulful, unpretentious. I'm more pretentious than they are, but unpretentious about them. Always kind of less political than siding with the underdog is something that I like, and then, and especially Cash and Merle Haggard, you can't quite pin them down as being, they're not really interested in politics in abstract in terms of like liberalism or conservatism. They seem to be like invested in people as artists and as men, and that's something I admire. And just the fact that they're artists in a blue collar vein, but at the highest level. That's kind of my ambition, is to try to do kind of blue collar American storytelling, but to hopefully raise it to a pretty decent level. So those two guys in particular are guys that I keep returning to, like, what would Johnny Cash do? What would Merle Haggard do? In addition to just listening to them all the time.
I love it. Well, thanks, man. And as always, Pete, it's always wonderful to hang out with you. The Pete's on the air again. Anything in closing, Pete?
No, thank you for the invite. I enjoyed this, and I'm kind of fired up right now. I had a couple auditions lately, but I'm feeling like super creative after spending an hour with Tony. It's awesome.
Awesome. I'm feeling like too. Yeah, I'm ready to jump in and write some weird shit now. So thanks, guys.
Okay. Stand by. I'm going to sign off. Hold on.
Okay.